Hi everyone, this is BritSimon. So I wanted to try and answer some of the questions that I'm getting from people at the moment. So this video will be a bit of a question and answer type video, hopefully addressing some of the concerns that people have about the visa bulletin process, whether KCC are open, whether the embassies are open, when will they be reopening, that sort of thing, and what all of the aspects of the current pandemic mean for the DV lottery process. So let me see if I can go ahead and address some of those questions. Okay, so I'm going to read some questions here, and as I go through, I'll give you the answers to my best ability, and we'll see how that goes. Okay, so first question is from Nancy. Nancy called KCC and asked them if they're working, even though they're not scheduling interviews, and they said no, everything is on hold. KCC said everything is on hold, they're not working on anything, and they cannot extend the process after the due date of September. Okay, so let's take that last point first. It is exactly accurate that they cannot extend the date past the 30th of September. There was somebody else who wrote to me recently about a lawyer who had told them about the AILA's question to the government about whether certain deadlines could be extended. But the lawyer and the person asking me the question misunderstood the answer or the question or something, because this is not a complicated question. The AILA have asked the government to postpone some deadline dates with regard to processing deadlines. So this is the sort of deadlines that says you have 60 days to respond to this letter or 90 days to respond to this process, whatever it might be. They're asking for those deadlines to be extended. What they are not asking for, and what they cannot ask for, is an extension of the visa bulletin, the fiscal year deadline that we have for the DV lottery process. The fiscal year is unchangeable. It's set by a matter of law. The fact that the DV lottery ends on the end of the fiscal year, which is the 30th of September each year, cannot be changed. That's a part of law. That cannot be changed by a group of lawyers asking for that to be changed. Can't be changed by me asking for it or you asking for it. Can't be changed by Trump asking for it. It would need to be changed by a law. The law would have to go through our houses of Congress, etc., through the President's desk, and frankly nobody is going to do that at the moment, because they have got far more important things to do. Even if they thought that that was a sensible idea, which it wouldn't be a sensible idea, they are worried about the pandemic. They're not worried about the DV lottery. So last question first, no, they're not going to extend that deadline. That's absolutely clear. Are KCC not working on anything? Is everything on hold? Well, they sent out the 2NLs, so the cadence of the process, the normal process goes something like this. The visa bulletin is released around about the 15th of the month, right? Very shortly, within 2 or 3 days after the visa bulletin, KCC send one batch of 2NLs to cases that they already knew they were going to schedule. And what you have to understand is that the visa bulletin is set based on information KCC already have as regards to DV lottery. The visa bulletin, by the way, also includes information about non-DV lottery cases, and so it's a much wider topic than just DV lottery, but we're one part of the immigration perspective. DV cases represent about 5% of immigration to the United States every year. That's all, 5%, nothing more than that. It's not that important compared to the rest of the immigration matters. So anyway, so back to the cadence. So visa bulletin comes out, a couple of days later the first batch of 2NLs go out, and at the end of the month a second batch of 2NLs go out. That's because the reason they're in two batches is because of the scheduling systems at some embassies. It's easier to schedule those other embassies with their manual processes rather than the automated processes that they can use for some of the embassies. So there are two distinct batches. What happened this month, or last month in March, was the visa bulletin was published. 2 NLs went out to a number of cases, the first batch, and about 2 days after the 2 NLs went out, there was a decision to close the embassies around the world, and KCC cancelled all of the interviews they had just arranged for May. Okay, so the embassies around the world have been closed now. They were closed partially in March, they'll be closed all of April, and they were closed, the interviews have been cancelled for May because the embassies are likely still to be closed at that point. So KCC at the moment are certainly in a holding pattern. There's not much they can do. They can't schedule cases right now because the embassies are closed. Now, will the next visa bulletin be published? This is another part of this question. Yes, it will be published. The visa bulletin will be published. That doesn't mean that there needs to be some increase in the numbers. There may be an increase in the numbers. They could handle it a couple of different ways. But it doesn't guarantee that there will be an increase in the numbers. So the visa bulletin will be published. I'm constantly being asked, will the visa bulletin be published? Yes, it will be published. That's obvious. There's no reason to not publish that visa bulletin. But the numbers that are in it, I'm not sure what's going to happen about that, and how many interviews KCC will be able to arrange, I don't know. It's entirely dependent not on the visa process itself or the amount of visas left or anything like that. It's dependent on the pandemic. So we'll talk about that a little bit more. I did create a video, extensive video yesterday, talking about some of these matters, but to be perfectly honest, I'm an optimistic person. I don't like talking about pessimistic topics, and at the moment the pandemic is obviously the biggest topic. It's controlling everything about the DV lottery right now, and it will do for weeks to come, possibly months to come. And so on reflection, the video that I posted that I haven't released today was just frankly far too depressing to be published, because I talk in detail about aspects of the pandemic. So I'll see if I can give you some of that information without necessarily being so depressing about the whole thing. So anyway, back to the DV lottery case. So to Nancy, answering your questions, they are working. They picked up the phone and they answered you, Nancy. That's proof that they're working. But they're not scheduling interviews, and they didn't schedule the second batch of interviews, and they may or may not schedule interviews in April. We can only wait and see. Okay? And no, the process won't be extended beyond September. That's quite certain. Okay. Next question. WRG asked about, are there stories about people moving over these days with the pandemic? It would be good to hear them and get an idea of the things I would need to go through. That's an excellent question. And it's something I've touched on in another video, where I just want to make clear to people what the position really is. 80% of the USA is on a lockdown at the moment. People are being asked to stay in their homes as much as possible, only go out for absolute necessities. Many businesses have been closed. Businesses are going out of business. There's going to be widespread bankruptcies from business owners, etc. And in the last 2 weeks, 10 million people have filed for unemployment. They've asked for unemployment benefits from the government. 10 million people. There are 150 to 160 million working people in the USA at a normal point with today's population. So 10 million people in just 2 weeks is an extraordinary, unprecedented number of people filing for unemployment benefit. There are some reasons why it's a little bit higher than normal that are somewhat artificial. The stimulus package has provided some extra help for people that are unemployed and have allowed people on furlough to apply for unemployment benefit. Furlough is essentially you keep the relationship with your employer. They may even pay you enough money to cover your health benefits, but they're not going to pay you any money for salary because they've sent you home. So rather than just terminate the relationship or terminate your employment, they put you on furlough, which is a temporary, in theory, a temporary period of time where you're not employed, you're not doing a job, but you still have that relationship, and the hope and expectation is that you would go back to work when things are better. Normally, before the stimulus package, that sort of person wouldn't have been qualified for the unemployment benefits, but now they are. So that's like that. So to answer WRG's question, what's it like in the USA at the moment? Well, it's a very difficult time to come here as a new immigrant, and you won't find work easily because people that have a job are keeping those jobs. There's no one that's going to be trading their job at the moment, and there are many people who've been made unemployed through this pandemic. And I expect the impacts of this to last months from now, probably the remainder of this year in terms of the economic impact. So what's it like coming here at the moment? It's going to be hard. It's going to be very hard for any new immigrant. You're not going to be at the top of the pile. There are going to be 10 million people and more looking to get their jobs back or looking for other jobs. And those people will reduce their expectations in terms of salary. So the economy is going to take a longer term hit. So it's not a good time to be coming to the USA. So if you have no choice but to come here, fine, but you're going to find things are tougher. However, the same thing is going to happen in your country, whether you know it or not yet. You're going to have the same situation. America's probably hit pretty bad and worse than most countries. In theory, if you look at the web pages which keep account of the reported cases of COVID, America is clearly, has more cases than any other country. But that's partly because there are a number of other countries that are just not telling the truth about their number of infected people. They either are not telling the truth or they're not testing, so that they don't know the truth. India, for example, has gone on a total lockdown. 1.3 billion people have been asked to stay at home. And yet they've got 3,000 cases, infections, and they've had less than 100 deaths. Obviously, those numbers are complete nonsense. That's not true. You don't lock down 1.3 billion people because 3,000 people are sick and 100 people have died. You just don't do that. In Ecuador is reporting 3,000 people ill. In reality, if you just Google Ecuador COVID, you'll see that there are cities like Guayaquil that are going through terrible times. Hundreds of people are dying just in one city. Bodies are lying in the street. There are so many people dying that bodies are being left to rot out in the street. There is just not enough people to pick up the bodies. There's not enough places to store the bodies, and according to the official figures, they've got 3,000 people sick. Obviously nonsense. So the pandemic is much worse in some countries than they are admitting to. And so although the situation in America might seem bad if you look at the numbers, the reality is that it's either in or it's coming to other countries much faster than you would understand. So you have to make a plan with that assumption, WRG. You should do so. Okay, E35 asked the same question. Have KCC stopped working? Nobody's received their confirmation letters. I've explained that. Let's see. Okay, here's an interesting question from Rumble. I wonder what's their criteria for opening or closing the embassy. It doesn't seem like it's related to the situation in a specific country, as the US chose to close all of its embassies, even countries with very low infection rates and almost no restrictions in place. To the best of my knowledge, the US is the only country in the world that chose to shut down all of its embassies around the world, and just the more, or rather than just the more severely affected areas. Well, again, that's kind of a misunderstanding. Number one, other countries, if you look at Europe, other countries, other advanced first world countries have shut down their operations, their economies. They have shelter-in-place orders in the same way that America does. Some countries are in a better position than America because they've been testing more. The Trump administration have done an awful, terrible job of providing enough tests. So even though we've got over 250,000 people recorded as being infected, that number is vastly underreported because not many people have been tested. You can only get a test if you are showing serious symptoms of the virus. There just aren't enough tests available, and it's absolutely a shortcoming that the government is responsible for. In other countries, the same amount of sickness is there, whether the countries admit the numbers or not, right? So there's two things going on. Will the embassies reopen on an individual basis? Possibly, depending on what the conditions are like in those countries. But don't be fooled. The conditions in the countries is either bad now already, worse than they're admitting, or in 3 and 4 weeks from now, it's going to be bad there too. The period of time where a country goes from almost no cases to having tens of thousands or even hundreds of thousands of cases is very short. It's probably only, we're early April, it's in around about early March, Trump was still calling this a hoax. It seems ironically laughable now. But we knew about COVID in January. South Korea had their first case on the same day we did. South Korea immediately started testing and have been more in control of their testing than we have, and have kept their death rates and their infection rates lower than we have. We stumbled along without testing and eventually pulled the panic button in terms of shelter in place. So since mid-March and now, probably 2 to 3 weeks, the number of cases have skyrocketed from, let's say, 3,000 or 4,000 people infected to 270,000 or whatever it is. I think it's more than that now, 280,000, heading for 300,000 probably by tomorrow, of infected cases now. The health systems in various cities is rapidly being overwhelmed. In New York, they have refrigerated trucks being delivered at hospitals to store the bodies because they've run out of space for storing the bodies. The medical staff are getting sick because they don't have appropriate personal protection equipment, and they're reusing equipment that should be used one time only, such as masks, etc. And so our medical staff who are on the front line of this, we can't cope without them. They're getting sick, they're dying. We're having doctors and nurses dying because people are too stupid to heed the warnings and stay at home, and therefore have increased infections at a too high a rate. Mind you, I have to say again, the Trump administration were calling this a hoax just a few weeks ago, and Trump was standing in front of his medical staff saying, this is not a big deal, we've got this under control, we've got just a dozen cases or whatever, we've got this handled, don't worry about this. Absolute clueless. Gave people who believe him a full sense of security, and so those people have gone around thinking they're invincible. This is just like a flu, and gone and infected each other, and those people are now dying in New York hospitals. So New York is particularly badly hit because the city is very densely packed. People are fast moving, busy, active people, and the virus just spread massively quickly in that city. But that's coming to other cities in the US. We've got now other cities reporting similar sort of growth patterns, and it's going to spread throughout the US like that. Will the embassies reopen? They were shut down centrally by a central order. They could be reopened by a central order, but I think it's far more likely that the central government, the Department of State, which controls the embassies abroad, will say to each embassy, you decide, beyond this point, which might be May or it might be June, I don't know, you decide when you open your doors for interviews based on the health of the staff, ultimately. Nobody's life is worth your green card. I'm sorry, but that's the reality. Nobody deserves to die because they've had to open the doors of the embassy to interview people who are desperate for a green card. And that allows people in the waiting room to pass the virus from one to another in the waiting room, or the interviewer at the embassy becoming sick, or the staff at the embassy becoming sick and die because they're trying to give you an immigrant visa. Nobody deserves that. We shouldn't be risking people like that. And frankly, I would be amazed if America would do that. So there'll be no rush to reopen the embassies. It'll only be in countries where the rate of infections are extremely well controlled. And frankly, I don't know any country that's going to be in that position in a few weeks' time. So I'm not particularly optimistic about the reopening date of embassies, and how it will happen, I don't know. People have asked how they will operate once they are open. They will try and schedule first the people that have been scheduled for interview but were cancelled. So that's people from March, April and May currently. It could be people from June as well. They'll give priority to those cases that are already current and were scheduled. For that reason, they may therefore keep the visa bulletin numbers low. There is another possibility, the complete opposite in terms of the visa bulletin, where you just make each region current or close to current, and you say, look, if you're able to be scheduled, if you're ready to be scheduled, we're going to schedule you because the embassies are open again now, and we want as many people to get a visa as possible. They may do that. I don't know. I honestly don't know. I can't predict it, and nobody's told me what the reality will be. So let's talk about someone else. Helena has emailed me before. Helena's got a Russian extension email address, although she has in the past told me, I believe, she's from Armenia. People from Russia tend to have what I would say is a fatalistic approach to life. I've got friends from the Ukraine, the former USSR, and they have this very similar sort of characteristic or personality trait. And this is why so many Russians, there are many Russians that think Putin's a wonderful man, whereas most of the free world thinks he's some sort of monster. Putin thinks he's wonderful. Trump thinks he's wonderful. Of course. But anyway, Helena writes, she's asking, is it true that KCC doesn't even check the documents now? How is that? They can do it remotely, ! Helena, all the exclamation marks in the world don't get your point across. Just simple writing is fine. Work from home, more exclamation marks. She's telling the KCC staff, work from home. Will it be the April visa bulletin? She means, will the April visa bulletin be released? Yes, it will be. Will the numbers increase? I don't know. Green card is a law. They cannot stop from doing their work. Yeah, they can. The green card isn't a law. There's no law that says you have to be given a green card. There's no law that says somebody needs to risk their life, Helena, to give you a green card. And a green card, even through the DV lottery, is a privilege, not a right. And I wouldn't want a single person to die to give anybody a green card. And I hope, Helena, you feel the same once you calm down. But every time you write to me, Helena, I get the same thing with multiple exclamation marks, question marks, and the same thing every single time. And every single time this sort of same attitude. So then she talks about frustration. So after the anger, in the first part of her post, she's then talking about the frustration and the fear that she has, which I totally understand and I empathise with. I cannot agree with my inner self that I will lose my lifetime chance to change my life with this damn corona, sh, whatever. So you might, Helena. It would be a horrific thing for that to happen, and it may happen to a lot of people this year, and I absolutely empathise with that. But in the big picture, as I say, I can't imagine putting a single person's life on the line in order to make that better for you or for anyone else. So that's just my belief system. You may see it differently. You're entitled to your opinion, as I am mine. But that's what it is. Now, Helena has a case number of EU 35,000. It's pretty close. She would normally have expected to be in the next visa bulletin. She may be, but they may not be able to schedule that interview. They may. I don't know. We'll have to wait and see, Helena. I have no control over it, and neither do you. So we'll have to wait and see. People have asked me about the whether we can read information. A user called Brondo has posted about the CIEC information that came from Zarthisius's scraping the website, where he's published that information. Thank you, Zarthisius, for that. So she's asking, she or he is asking, he is asking one question, which is about all the interviews in Moscow are already refused. The ones that have been scheduled for May are already refused. That's a particular thing to Moscow Embassy. They've been doing that a few years ago now, for a few years now. They put cases on administrative processing, which is now noted as being refused in the CX system, before the interview. And what that really means is that they're doing some additional security procedures in the embassy, controlled by the embassy, in addition to what KCC go through. They've been doing that for a number of years. They publicised why. It was to cut down on fraud and crime in applications in Moscow, and so they have these additional measures in place. And as I say, for some years, I have noticed that they've been putting cases on AP prior to the interview. So that's what's going on there. Other people have asked me what I could interpret from the CIAC cases and the CIAC data. In reality, it's irrelevant. I can tell you this. There are very few visas that have been issued. We're not going to see anything like 50,000 visas issued this year. Very few have been issued so far. I can tell you that the number of interviews scheduled for EU was around about 400. I was hoping for 12 or 1,300 interviews in that month. Of course, without the second batch of interviews, that didn't happen. And of course, those 400 interviews have all been cancelled now anyway. So, the cold hard truth is that we're not going to make the progress that we had hoped to make. There's probably going to be risk. That risk may be only to high case numbers, or it could be to all case numbers. I don't know. Okay, let's just continue the last couple of questions. So here's a question from, looks like JLo. It says, "Hi Simon, I arrived in the States 2 months ago, decided to get some rest and applied for a job just 2 weeks ago, which I got. and due to COVID-19 I could not start. I'm eligible to apply for, or I am eligible, it means am I eligible to apply for unemployment benefit? Will it be seen as public charge? Is unemployment benefits public charge? No, it's not. Will you be eligible for unemployment benefit? I don't know. My understanding of that, and I don't know, I've never applied for unemployment benefit and I'm not an expert in that, but my understanding is that you needed to have paid tax, been an employee prior to that event, and so they'll be looking that you've actually contributed towards unemployment insurance to be able to draw from that pot. So I don't know. I'm sorry for your position. That's really bad luck, that you came at that wrong time and you didn't start work earlier, etc. So that's an unfortunate position. There's, all I can say is I'm sorry you're in that position. Right. So this is a question from Maria. Hi Brit, I activated the green card in August of last year and was planning to move to the US in a few months, but due to the potential economic crisis, I'd rather postpone it until we know more about this situation. So that person would be normally expected to come back after 6 months or 12 months. You can be out of the country for up to 12 months with no prior permission, and generally speaking, your return is fine. The immigration officers sometimes give people a little bit harder time between when they've been absent from the country between 6 and 12 months, but still legally you're entitled to return without any real permission up to 12 months. After 12 months, you are supposed to have sought permission prior to leaving the USA to be out of the USA for more than 12 months. Up to 2 years, you can apply for a re-entry permit. In theory, after 12 months, you would need to apply for what's called an SB1 visa at your embassy outside of the country, which is a returning resident visa, and you have got to explain to the local embassy why you should be allowed access back to the USA, what has kept you out. If there's unavoidable reasons that has kept you from returning to the USA, then they are likely to grant that SB1 as long as you've done the other things you needed to do, such as filing tax and that sort of thing, while you're out of the country. So the tax deadline has been extended, by the way. It's normally closing on April 15th. It's now 3 months later. So for those people that need to file a tax return, they've got more time. And do file a tax return even if you've not been working in the USA in 2019. You should file a tax return anyway because you have to declare your foreign income if you were a lawful permanent resident of the USA in 2019. So do go ahead and do that, Maria. So is there any procedure in place to extend the 1 year period that they give us to move? So I just explained that a little bit. Hopefully that's explained it well enough. You can apply for the SB1 visa. You may also, if you've got your plastic green card, you can turn up at the airport, you can fly. They won't know that you've been out of the country for more than a year. The airport airline won't know. So on your arrival to the USA, the immigration officer has got a choice. They can either give you a hard time about the fact that you've been out for 12 months. They may, right there and then, admit you with no hard time because you've been out for an unavoidable reason, such as the pandemic we're going through and the subsequent economic impact. They may do that. They may also, there's two other things that they can do. They can admit you. Well, so here's what they generally do to people who are in that position. Depending on the immigration officer, if they are on some sort of power trip, they will try and persuade someone to sign a form to be allowed to enter the country as a tourist and relinquish their green card. You do not have to sign that form. You decline that offer, thank you very much. Don't agree to that. There is absolutely no need to do that, because the other option that they have to exercise, they can't send you back. They're not allowed to send you back. You're a lawful permanent resident still, even though you've been out too long. So what they have to do is they have to parole you into the country. They admit you into the country. And they can send you back in very rare cases, if they believe you committed fraud, etc. In very rare cases, I think. But generally speaking, they have to admit you into the country on parole, and then put you in front of an immigration judge. They'll set an appointment. They'll set a time, some days or weeks later, for you to appear in front of an immigration judge, and that immigration judge could determine that you have forfeited your green card, and then you'll be set for deportation. But if you've got a good reason, and you've been doing the other things you're supposed to do, you've kept up with your responsibilities, I think it's very unlikely that an immigration judge would order the removal, your removal from the country and the relinquishment of your green card. I think it's very unlikely. So an immigration officers should probably know that. So you're more than likely to be allowed to just enter. So if you don't want to go down the SB1 route, you can try that other option, but it's a bit more hassle. The SB1 route gives you a visa, gives you an explanation as to why you're entering. You don't show that at the airport when you're checking in, because you show your green card, but you do show when you arrive at the immigration. You show that permission that you've been given, the SB1. So that answers your question, Maria. And then there's a slightly different question here to the previous question. I came to the US in March 2019. This sounds suspiciously like the other question. March, maybe not. I think I had one similar to this. Anyway, I came to the US in March 2019. I'm a green card holder with SSN. I filled out a tax return and provided direct deposit details. Am I eligible to receive the stimulus check or not? I've heard that I've had to live at least 2 years in the US to be eligible, but I'm not sure. I'm not sure either. The stimulus information has been released recently, but it's not been, it's Trump, right? So it's not been released very well. The information has not been released very well. I work in the payroll industry. I'm working 18, 20-hour days at the moment, and I have been for the last two weeks, 7 days a week. I've been working all weekends, late at night, because the arrangements made by various states and the federal government to try and help people through this virus basically mean a bunch of deferrals of tax for employers, incentive for employers to keep people employed, all sorts of measures, including the stimulus information, small business loans, all sorts of things. So many of those things I'm having to work on in terms of implementing them. And I can tell you from first-hand expert knowledge, the information coming out is nowhere near of the detail and quality it would normally be. I understand they rushed it through, but still there's some basic failings in the way it's been rolled out. And so there are a bunch of questions we still don't know the answers to. And that's partly why I'm working extremely long hours at the moment. So thank you, Trump administration, for that. So will you be entitled to the stimulus check? What I've heard is that they will send the stimulus check to taxpayers who had reported tax in the year 2018 and in some cases the year 2019. In other words, filed a tax return for that period of time. And if that's the standard that they apply, it's not like saying you have to have been here for 2 years, but it's sort of similar to that. It means that you have to have been here for some time before. So I'm not 100% sure that's going to be how it's set up. It's income based anyway. I don't know much about it, even though I'm in the payroll business, because my income is too high to receive any of this stimulus check. For a lot of people in California, it's of no use. A $1,200 check for me is completely pointless. If I had lost my job, which I haven't, but if I had lost my job, that wouldn't begin to pay my expenses, not even for a week, let alone for a month. That's pretty useless for people living in California. But it will be a major help to people in other parts of the country, and it will make a significant difference. And it's $1,200 per person, per adult, and then $500 for children. It is kind of a loan a little bit. It's being offset against next year's taxes, so that people understand that. It's an advance, if you like, against the taxes that you're going to pay. So you will report for it next year. But nevertheless, it's a good thing, and it's a positive way to try and help people at this time, which they badly need it. Will it come to you in your particular situation, Kenny? I don't know, is the honest answer. I don't think the 2 years will be an issue, but perhaps you may not have worked enough last year. I don't know. But anyway, hopefully they'll implement that over the coming weeks, and you'll find out. Okay, so I just went through a number of questions there. I answer these sort of questions every day. Many of them are repetitive. Many of them are the same questions that I've received from other people every day. That's okay. I understand that some people, don't read everything I write, and they don't read other people's questions. But do what you can to exercise some judgment and common sense, obviously. As I mentioned, I'm working extremely hard at the moment, so I'm slow to answer these questions, and I'm probably a little bit shorter in my answers, shall we say, than I would normally be at the moment, because my temper level is probably not as good as it normally is. I'm obviously under stress and working hard myself. So and plus it's an extremely difficult time for a lot of people in the States at the moment. It's weird. If you go out of the house, there's not much car traffic. Businesses are shut. I'm worried for friends that perhaps are going to lose their jobs over this. My job may be secure, and I may be secure, but my friends may be going to go through difficult times over this, and that's not a comfortable feeling. And even if I don't know people, there are people that I know within my community, extended friends, shall we say, that are going to go through difficult times. And I'm an empathetic person. I don't like to hear of people struggling in that way. We're all having to pull together as a community at the moment in the USA, and you will in your country soon. If you're not already struggling with that, you will soon understand a little bit more what it's going to be like. So finally, about the pandemic itself, take it seriously, please. Limit your contact now, whether your government is telling you to do that or not. If you're able to work from home, do that now, whether your government is telling you to stay at home or not. It's only common sense to try and avoid this. This is not the flu. It is it's a very aggressive virus. The transmission rates, the ability to pass it from someone to another person or a number of people in public environments is very, very high, much higher than a normal flu. And the way it attacks the body is a particularly aggressive way, and people that are dying from pneumonia. So that's ultimately what happens. The virus causes pneumonia, and pneumonia, if you know anything about it, it's not a pleasant way to die. And there is just a shortage of medical staff. There's a shortage of beds. There's a shortage, crucially, of respirators and life-saving equipment that is needed for people. And so older people are more susceptible than young. That is true, but it is not true to say that young people can't get it or that won't die from it. I know of people, I've read many stories, I've seen first-hand accounts of young, fit, healthy 30 and 40-year-old family people who die over a period of days, just die. And so, don't underestimate this at all. You don't want it. You don't want to be fighting this virus. So do what you can to keep yourself healthy. Wash your hands 20 seconds at least with soap and water. That is, funnily enough, your best protection. And staying in your house is your best protection. Reduce your contact with people. So those are things you should be doing right now. There is no vaccine for this virus yet. None of us have a natural immunity to it. None of us. So it could easily infect half of the population of your country, for example. Easily, right? It could easily infect half to a third, let's say, of the United States. If 100 million people in the United States get this virus, or were to get this virus because social distancing and the stay-at-home orders were removed, then we would be talking of numbers in the millions of dead, 1 million, 2 million of dead. So this is no game. This is no flu. This is not like the normal flu season. This is far, far worse than that. So take care of yourselves, please. It's just common sense to do that. And hopefully things will return to normal in the DV lottery world soon. Fingers crossed, I really hope so. I honestly don't know what will happen. I don't have predictions. I have no idea what's going to happen in the Visa Bulletin. Nothing like this has ever happened before, obviously. And so it's impossible to know how things are going to go. So I can't predict. So if you're asking me for predictions of what will happen in the next Visa Bulletin, or will my number get current, I have no idea. I don't know. I have literally no idea. So, and I know the subject very well, but that's not the point. It's not about DV lottery. It's about the pandemic. So, okay. This, believe it or not, is a more positive tone than my video yesterday that I would have published. So you can imagine how depressing that one was, right? So I'm sorry about that. It's a depressing topic, but I hope it's been interesting for you to see my reaction, my answering of questions on the fly kind of thing. Which is what I do. I mean, I rarely have to research anything. I know this topic very well. I over a period of years, I understand, and rarely I get a question which causes me to actually do some additional research because there's a topic I don't know about. But I do that occasionally. Okay, everyone, that'll be about it for tonight. Take care and look after yourselves. Okay, bye-bye.